Hi, I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, and welcome to another episode of Body, Mind, Spirit. I'm so excited because we're going to be speaking with Dr. Beverly Yates, and we're going to be talking about a condition that over 34.2 million people in the United States have. And there's as much and probably even more than 7.3 million people walking around that haven't even been diagnosed yet. So, once again, Dr. Beverly Yates, um, your passion is diabetes.
Yes, definitely, because it's such a lifestyle sensitive chronic illness. And the thing about it being lifestyle sensitive means that there's a lot of hope because you could take control of it. That's the good news.
What how did you end up in this field? Because you
Well,
actually started off in engineering.
yeah, I'm an electrical engineer from MIT. I work in Silicon Valley, and I just found a lot of the practical aspects of that career really unfulfilling simply because there was very little people contact. I'm more of a people person than I realized in my mid 20s, into late 20s. And so I made a career change. I moved to the Pacific Northwest with my then fiance and now husband of over 35 years. And along that journey, I discovered some health problems that I had that the Pacific Northwest really made clear to me. And what got my health put back together was naturopathic medicine. I wasn't personally familiar with naturopathic medicine at all. Initially, had never even heard of it, but I'm a person who loves results. And I was profoundly touched by the results that the naturopathic physician could get for me with my health, and no one else had been able to do anything useful for. So voila, here I am.
Oh my God, that is so exciting. And then what made you decide to focus on diabetes?
Well, it's a multi-part journey, right? Initially, my focus had been on chronic illnesses, including things with stress and sleep, certainly heart disease and gastrointestinal problems. But you know what, Dr. Greenleaf, over time, what I found was that more and more people were coming into the clinic from the late 90s into the 2000s with blood sugar problems. And so I was seeing more people with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, on occasion type 1, but by far, and the numbers still reflect this, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes are way more common. And as I watched more and more incoming patients come with already high blood sugar levels, I was beginning to understand how much of a rising tide this was then, and unfortunately still is now. So I felt like, hey, if I'm working on heart disease, it just makes sense to also work on diabetes. And then I recently switched that focus to diabetes, heart disease. Most of my patients have one or both of those concerns.
What is actually the concern with diabetes? We hear about it. A lot of people might know that it has to do with your blood sugar being high, but why is that and how does it happen?
Yeah, why does it matter? Like, who cares, right? So here's the deal. It turns out having high blood sugar, high levels of glucose in your bloodstream really wrecks everything because your blood goes everywhere, right? So it's going to affect all of your organs, your eyes and your vision, your kidneys, the circulation you have in your fingertips, your toes, your nose, your clitoris and pelvic floor, your penis, anything that's the endpoint of the body circulation is going to be even more affected because that's where all of the circulation has to return from back to the heart to get the oxygen and then go back out again, right? So in that journey, if you've got high blood sugar, and I hope everybody understands this, I'm going to make it really simple. Think of it like this. Normal blood sugar means that your blood, your circulation can move freely, smoothly, and easily. It's like having a lot of cars on a freeway. When it's not overly crowded, things are fine. Now, if you have high blood sugar, things aren't fine. You've got a lot more cars on the freeway. Your blood is literally, in this sense, being compromised because your cells don't move as easily. They also don't exchange nutrients and waste as easily either. So all sorts of processes get backed up. And this is why diabetes can be so devastating, type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, because with these, what I like to call roller coaster rides of blood sugar, your body's getting whipsawed. Your pancreas puts out insulin, another hormone, to try to grab up that extra blood sugar. But at some point, this process gets worn out, if you will, less efficient. And so then all of the blood circulation issues start to back up. The body becomes overwhelmed. It can't handle all this. So since this is a delicate hormonal kind of a process, like any other hormone, we got to give it that respect. But people don't understand how much they're being compromised. They're losing inches day by day by day, small amount, small amount, small amount. It's like that analogy with the pot and the frog and the stove, and you put the poor frog in the water. You turn on the water under the pot. You turn the heat up a little bit, little bit, little bit. The frog can't tell that it's gradually being cooked, right? And so with high blood sugar problems, people start to lose function and they lose it gradually. It's not usually a dramatic thing. So maybe their vision becomes a little less clear. They start to lose their kidney function. They might start to lose the sensitivity in their fingertips and in their feet, their toes, clitoris or penis. Their sexual satisfaction may go down. Their ability to think clearly is compromised. And the classic is the face plan after lunch. People who are so tired, typically in the afternoon after they eat what might be a very unblood sugar friendly, shall we call it, meal at lunchtime. They do face plant, right after lunch, and they're so tired. That's one of the big red flags. And so unless you've been checked explicitly for a blood sugar problem, it's easy to not know this is even happening, which is what you started with, right? So many people are not diagnosed. They have no idea. Skin color changes, all sorts of things go along with this disease.
So it seems like too that by the time you're exhibiting symptoms, a lot of the damage has already happened.
And the good news is that much of that damage is reversible if you get a handle on, or I should say, let's be really hopeful here, when you get a handle on those lifestyle factors. Nutrition will matter a lot. Stress management, healthy ways to relieve stress, great quality sleep because it restores everything, including your soul, and consistent exercise of the quality and quantity that makes sense for your blood sugar needs. And let me tell you right now, tons and tons of time spent on a treadmill is probably not the answer. It might involve something like resistance training, weight training. You need muscle.
If if there's tons of people being not diagnosed and potentially, having these problems, what should we be doing? Like, where should we go? Who should we ask? Where do we start? What age do we start? I know there's a lot, but
where you should go is to get your regular checkup. And if you don't have a doctor, these days you can get a lot of lab tests online through cooperative labs inexpensively with cash pay. That whole landscape has changed. This was not available in the late 90s into the early 2000s. So you have direct access. And the good news is that, unlike so many things in healthcare, blood sugar tests, your fasting morning blood sugar, along with your A1C, alpha 1 Charlie, A1C, are inexpensive tests. You can get both of those done, blood labs, for probably under $20 each one. So say that's under $50 for both. So it's much more affordable for most people. So if you don't have a doctor, don't throw your hands up in despair. You need to know what those numbers are and whether or not you're in a pre-diabetes or a type 2 diabetes range. And if your A1C is also showing that you have average, good long-term control of your blood sugar, because it's quite possible to have a healthy, normal morning blood sugar, but yet have long-term higher A1C, right? And that could be a harbinger of some other things, other hormonal imbalances. Maybe if you're a perimenopausal woman, that's one consideration. An andropausal man, if you've had a lot of stress, your A1C could go up. And if you have poor sleep, if you have sleep apnea, other things like that, that will also cause that blood sugar to raise for the long-term control. Remember, I talked about the roller coaster. This means at some part of the day or night, you're on that roller coaster, even though you might otherwise think you have a healthy life. So these are all red flags to get professional help as much as possible.
And what is a hemoglobin A1C?
Yeah, hemoglobin A1C is a fancy term, right? Used to be called glycosylated hemoglobin A1C, even fancier word. But the thing for folks who aren't in the medical world to know is the A1C, and what that indicates is how well your body keeps your blood sugar in that healthy range. So the higher your A1C goes, the higher it means you go out of range. So if you can see here, right, there's no roller coaster here. If you go like this, that's a roller coaster, right? And the more you go like the roller coaster, the more out of control it gets. So it means that your pancreas is working extra overtime to try to keep up with that demand, because the pancreas is the organ that makes that hormone called insulin that grabs up your normal amounts of blood sugar. And when there's lots of extra blood sugar, it's like a 4-alarm, 5-alarm fire. Your insulin production goes up to try to meet. So here's the roller coaster of blood sugar. Here's insulin trying to catch it. Sometimes it overshoots. Too much insulin over here. You get tired when that happens because all your energy's gone away. What's the normal situation? Insulin, that powerful hormone, is supposed to take up blood sugar, glucose, and bring it inside the cell to make it available as energy for you. When there's too much glucose, too much blood sugar, and insulin's tried its best, once it's got what it needs to handle inside the cell, extra blood sugar is stored as fat elsewhere throughout the body. This is where a dynamic that's called insulin resistance gets started, where insulin is less and less effective. What you want is for your insulin to be sensitive, not exhausted and worn out, and able to grab up that blood sugar and make it available for energy inside of your body cells. It's really ironic, because people with type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, have so much potential energy, but they're not able to tap it. And one of the classic symptoms is fatigue.
Wow.
Fatigue throughout the day, brain fog, you don't feel well, simple things. You just want to sit and stare. It is a classic precursor before, the more obvious problems come along.
It's funny. I always bring this up, but like the first time in my life where I was like, I'm going to be healthy was right around medical school. And that time the American Heart Association diet came out, and I rag on that diet all the time. I'm sorry, but I thought I was being healthy because I was eating all these carbs, which were low fat, and I wasn't eating meat, and I was eating bagels, probably like morning, like lunch, breakfast, dinner, everything. And I was starting to have problems with my blood sugar. And they were telling me at that time, you're pre-diabetic because you're having all these issues. And I'm like, well, what? I'm healthy. I'm not eating cholesterol, and I'm not, I'm eating low fat.
Yeah,
So
that was some really just wrong-headed information. It's been interesting to watch some of these large organizations and the advice that they give, right? Because it doesn't actually match normal human function, normal physiology, what we know to be true for human nutrition. So my thing has been over the years is to notice how many times these fads come and go, whether it's low fat, no fat, or it's low carbs, no carbs, or it's, fill in the blank. And the thing is, if you look at what humans around the world eat, and particularly places where people are actually still healthy, so it's not here, but other parts of the world, you'll have to notice that they eat a variety of foods. We're actually meant to eat a variety of foods. And the quality of what you eat, along with the quantity, is really a big factor when it comes to diabetes and its management or its reversal where possible for type 2 and for prediabetes. It's all going to be nutrition is a bullseye, your target, along with the stress, sleep, exercise, community, having great relationships, not being isolated or feeling particularly lonely, etc. These things all play powerful, powerful roles in our health. And, we don't have lab tests for community or isolation or how connected people feel, but I feel like it's just as valuable as all the rest. And then who you keep company with matters too, right? Like if everyone you're around wants to eat donuts all day and other things, then you're probably not going to be well. You're going to really be like the salmon swimming upstream, pushing against that. If, on the other hand, you have friends who have healthy habits, it's going to make it easier for you to enjoy that.
I love how you connected that whole idea of the body mind spirit with this, because of the fact that it is so interconnected.
Yeah.
Because we can't, if we treat just the body, we're gonna be missing out on so many aspects of how that interconnects with inflammation
Right.
and just general wellness.
Yeah,
So
definitely. That's part of the struggle, right? Trying to get these things into balance. And, sometimes people are so focused on their spiritual selves, they forget their physical vessel they currently occupy. And some people are so focused on that physical self, they don't pay attention to their mental health, their spiritual wellness, things of that nature, that some of the things that aren't quite as tangible, but are just as important.
and also you brought up the effect of sleep. Like I can't, how many people have sleep, like are not sleeping enough, and the whole range of disorders that can cause.
Sleep can break a whole lot of things, and it's underappreciated, right? Because we spend roughly a third of our lives asleep. If you have a baby or toddler, and if you have teenagers, or if you remember your teenage years, you may remember you wanted to sleep a lot, and those are kind of the bookends on the big sleep moments in human life. As adults, typically good sleep time for most people is going to be somewhere around 7.5 to 8.5, 9 hours. Very few people get that. So I always like to think of it as the idea of the opportunity to sleep. I think it's important to make sure you have good awareness and you talk to yourself in helpful, healing ways rather than blame yourself, right? So if you have a hard time with sleep for whatever reason, it's important to be able to think about it positively. And so you want to get to bed with enough opportunity to sleep the amount of time you have in mind. So if you know when you have a good night's sleep that you awake refreshed, let's say for you it's 8 hours, Maybe for someone else, it's 8.5, it's 9 hours. Maybe for someone else, it's 7.5 when they wake up with that. Seize the day, like carpe diem feeling quite naturally, organically. Pay attention to those things. And then you want to make sure you get to bed soon enough so that if you are going to get that 8 hours of sleep, let's say you go to bed at 10, and maybe you have to be up and awake and getting started with your day by 7. You want to build in a good 30 minutes to 60 minutes extra time, just in case it takes you a little longer to get to sleep, or maybe you awaken once to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and get back to sleep, so that you really truly are asleep for that target time. What many people do, unfortunately, particularly when they're not aware of this, they know perhaps or have a thought they should go to bed at 10. They actually go to bed at 11:30, midnight. And then
That's what I do.
yeah, they get disrupted sleep, and then they're up at 6 a.m. Your opportunity to sleep that target 7.5 to 9 hours, the math isn't there.
Yeah, that's
It wasn't enough time. It wasn't enough time.
I unfortunately fall into that category. I always try not to, but I'm trying to get a little bit better about it. But we're going to talk a little bit more after the break with Dr. Beverly Yates.
80% of women will suffer in silence, not knowing where to turn for answers. Confused about where to find reliable women's health information? Searching for the answers. But we got you covered. Get the answers that you deserve to start living your best life at this free virtual summit with over 30 experts talking about health, hormones, intimacy, and more. Sign up today for the Happy Vagina Rally.
All right, so we're back with Dr. Beverly Yates talking all things diabetes, and really everybody needs to be concerned about this. So, you think like, oh, can't happen to me. It can. This is so prevalent in our population. And so, Beverly, you're doing tons of things. You've written a book. You're all over the media. Like every time I look, you're doing an interview someplace, somewhere. And you have your protocol. You have the Yates Protocol, and you have a diabetes summit coming up later this year. So I don't know where you want to get started with that, but I would love to talk to you about all of it. I wish we had hours that we could talk to about those things, but
yeah, it's wonderful just to be able to share these things with the general public because, you're right. The prevalence of diabetes has been just such a shocker. Before, the big focus in the 70s, 80s, 90s was heart disease. And now I would say that diabetes is by far and away the new thing to be concerned with. And it's kind of the new old thing, right? It used to be that type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes was something that happened to people in their 60s, 70s, 80s when people were much older. And now we're seeing people as young as the age of 10,
ooh,
even in single digit ages with type 2 diabetes. I mean, this is absolutely not sustainable, right? So we're going now from a situation where we had maybe 1 in 10 people in the US who had type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, now to as many, it's over 1 in 3. It's approaching 1 in 2 people.
wow.
So if you're in a room of 10 people, right, we're going from 3 people out of 10 to 5 people out of 10, just to keep this, straightforward. And when you think about type 1 diabetes, which is when a person's pancreas doesn't make any insulin, which is somewhat of a different situation than type 2 or pre-diabetes. For type 1 diabetes, people will be on insulin for the rest of their lives. They will need it as a medicine. And yep, they will have to pay attention to the lifestyle issues too, right? That's about 5% of the people who have any kind of diabetes. By far, 95% have either type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, and many have not yet been diagnosed. So this is spun out of control. So from there, 2 things that I have to offer. One is the upcoming Diabetes Summit for 2022 at the end of July, to bring together experts from around the world to put together in one place great information accessible by the general public. The summit will be played each day from July 25th to the 31st. The content there will be available for free for consumption. So each day will have its topics and you catch them that day. Also, it's summertime, so people may or may not be around. The good news about that is that you can sign up, you can get emails to be notified, etc. I'm certainly will be on social media. So please do look for that if that can help you or someone that you care about. And then you're able to buy the content, all the recordings, if you want to have it conveniently packaged so you can access it when it's convenient for you. So we try to make this quality, fact-based, evidence-based information available around what are best practices, what helps people, what are some of the different other factors. Because just like you said, Dr. Greenleaf, so many different things are impacted by blood sugar. It's a huge topic, right? So we don't want people to feel overwhelmed, because for a lot of people, they'll recognize themselves, whether it's sleep issues, stress issues, cravings, family history, current lifestyle, workplace craziness, whatever it might be. There's lots of on-ramps to this. The good news is there's lots you can do to help yourself be healthier. So that's what got the Yates Protocol going, frankly. For your body of work, right, Dr. Greenleaf, you have the ways you think about things, certain systems, processes. For me, being an engineer, systems and processes just make sense. And as I noticed more patients coming in with these problems, new patients showing up with this, that, and the other thing, plus a blood sugar problem, I was like, let's see how we can help people walk this back where we can, if there's still that healing potential in them, and perhaps if it makes sense for them and they're able to stay diligent to their lifestyle things and to be consistent, progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection. We can do something about this. And the good news is that it's been really successful. So the Yates Protocol is an organized system, a process to take someone who is starting out with, say, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, or if they have type 1 and need help with the lifestyle side of it, to help people get blood sugar control, to achieve and maintain blood sugar control and be able to get to a balanced place with their blood sugar, so they're no longer on that blood sugar roller coaster, but they're in that healthy range consistently. And then their health is so much better. Their energy comes back. They have the time and attention to enjoy the people that they care about. They're not exhausted all the time. They're actually interested in other things. Life is so much easier when you have your health.
It's funny because I was just thinking, and I love how earlier you brought up pelvic health and diabetes, because that's obviously in my office, that's my focus. And I mean, of course, I'm seeing it through that lens, but I see so many people with diabetes have an increased risk of overactive bladder, recurrent infections, bladder infections, prolapse. They're much higher risk of things drooping and dropping and falling out of their body. So we were talking, it really affects every tissue, and that's just the pelvis. And I just focus on that. It really, sexual function you brought up, it really affects every organ system. So
definitely, it's pretty profound. I don't think people understand until they're in the middle of it. And like you had alluded to, it's quite possible for there to be a moment where it's too late. There's so much damage done, but that's pretty rare. Most people are not at the too late stage. So I would say to anyone who's despairing or feeling like you should give up, don't give up. Don't give up. Do make that decision. Make that nutrition, that healthy nutrition, your focus as best you can. And it doesn't have to be expensive either. We kind of have this notion in the US that to eat healthily and eat well has to be mega bucks. Depends on how you go about it, right? Like if you decide you want to do a plant-based diet and you focus on beans, let's say legumes, chickpeas, lentils, navy beans, black beans, kidney beans, those kinds of foods are really healthy. You've got protein in those foods, you've got fiber packaged together, you've got long-term, slow-burning carbohydrates, the starches, so instead of the rocket ride, like white rice or white potatoes, you've got the stuff that will keep your energy like this, instead of boop, 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 boop. Just saying, it does not have to be expensive.
I wanted to ask you too about some of the disparities in medicine and diabetes. Is it true that people of color are at higher risk of diabetes, and why is that?
Yeah, so we do know in the US specifically that there's an increased incidence of diabetes among people of color, right? So African Americans, Latinx, Southeast Asians. And one of the things to know is that it's not necessarily a genetic vulnerability. For instance, if you look at Black people broadly defined, so the Black diaspora, if you look at Africans in the countries of the continent of Africa, right? So it's like 54 countries we're talking about, massive, massive continent. You don't see this big spike in type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. But when someone moves from there to here, and if they adopt the diet here, the standard American diet, which in naturopathic medical school, we call the SAD diet, standard American diet.
I like that.
It just lacks nutrient density. It's nutrient poor, right? Then people start to develop the high blood pressure, the unfriendly cholesterol. They have problems with their weight. Now here comes prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, right? We can see the same thing for people who come from other parts of the world. It could be Southeast Asia. It could be the Polynesian Islands, fill in the blank. So with that in mind, anybody who's listening, please understand, we are all born to be well and healthy, but sometimes we have situations or circumstances where life's unfair that way. And so if people have more in the way of economic insecurity or financial instability, where they're not sure about, where their next meal's coming from, about housing, if they don't have jobs that actually have good benefits, et cetera, this contributes to an environment where someone is more likely to have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. The other side of that is people who are just as reasonably resourced, great jobs and great education, income, but they're so stressed. Maybe their job is just too demanding. Certainly the world of surgery can be put in this bucket. There's quite a few doctors of various kinds whose professional career is so demanding and stressful. Lawyers, accountants, engineers, whatever they may be, that and nurses too. Man, nurses can really be hugely affected by this, right? They wind up just as sick as someone who lives a life where they don't have the education, they don't have the income. So the whole thing is really quite skewed. But the point I'm trying to make is that there isn't necessarily a giant genetic predisposition as opposed to environmental influences. Like right now, the thought is maybe 30% of our health is determined by our genes and 70% is the nature side, is the nurture side, is the environmental impact, how we live our lives, lifestyle. And then there's the crap that happens to us, right? That's where you're more likely to have a problem. So if there's any genetic vulnerability whatsoever, it will be expressed in the environment that grabs people by the collar, as I like to say, and slams them against the wall of their genes.
I was also thinking sometimes I've had a couple patients over the years that are like, I'm not at risk of diabetes because I don't eat sugar. And there's this misconception that you got to eat a lot of sugar to have diabetes. So I'm going to have you address that.
It is a misconception, right? So one of the things to know is that stress all by itself can induce type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. So let's briefly touch on why. Stress, we often know in the general public as fight or flight, right? You are under threat. And you either stay and you fight or you flee. You run, you flight, right? Okay, so if that's true, you probably figure you might have a hormonal moment that renders you a superhero. So now you're a superwoman or superman, and you need to get out of Dodge or stay and fight. You can hear these stories of petite women lifting a car off of a trapped child or something like that, right? Like, how did she do that? Well, she had a huge spike in a stress hormone called cortisol. What else comes out with cortisol when we're stressed, though? And that's an acute momentary stress, right? Glucose, your blood sugar. Your blood sugar is like a champ. It's there to meet what? Your energy demands, like we talked about earlier. So if you have a big stressful moment, you have a lot of cortisol released, here comes a lot of blood sugar to give you fast, quick energy so you can be amazing in that moment. But what if many moments of your day are like that and you don't have the physical opportunity to wear off that extra burst of cortisol? And so instead of it being a momentary spike, it's like this throughout the day. And then there went your blood sugar. This can explain, right, why someone can have a normal fasting blood sugar, yet high A1C, because their average is like this, trending upwards. That's a classic scenario. If you have poor sleep, similarly, your body releases what? Cortisol. Why? Because it perceives the stress. Here comes the blood sugar, and the dance goes on. And you thought you were okay. And people are shocked sometimes with these diagnoses because they do have the stereotype in their mind that people are pouring buckets of sugar and everything they drink, and they're adding lots of sweets to whatever they eat, and they eat dessert and no actual dinner and blah, blah, blah. And nope.
Oh my God. And this is another reason why, sometimes people think, well, I'm not heavy, so I can't have diabetes because they think you need to be heavy, but it could really be anybody.
You can be quite lean. I know some type 2 diabetics in particular who can't buy a pound. But they absolutely I wish I had that have a blood sugar problem. Yeah. So some people who have prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, definitely are overweight, or perhaps on the more extreme end of overweight, they're obese, but they are certainly lean diabetics. So I always tell people, don't make assumptions about people. You don't know the rest of their backstory. You just don't. You'd be surprised. Clinically, you cannot make assumptions about people. Give people the respect. And a lot of us are just, I think, constitutionally judgmental.
This has been wonderful and so educational, Dr. Beverly. Where can people find out more information about you?
Sure. Hey, so if you're interested to get more info, you're always welcome to go to my website that you can check it out. It's DR, like the abbreviation for doctor, Beverly, Beverly, Yates.com. So DRBEVERLYYATES.com. If you're on social media, you can go to my Facebook page, the same name, Dr. Beverly Yates. And also on Instagram, same thing, Dr. Beverly Yates. Guess what? On YouTube, I have a channel under Dr. Beverly Yates.
Make sure you all check that out, especially the upcoming summit, which is going to be amazing. And just once again, I want to thank you. I want to remind everybody that if you really enjoyed today's broadcast, make sure you check out wytv7.org. Look at all our other programs that we have. Don't forget to donate. Every little bit counts. And it's going to something good. You can also check out some of our wonderful programs. And just quickly wrapping up, since our theme is trying, what would you like people to try more of this year when it comes to diabetes?
I'd love for people to try more of consistent exercise, particularly resistance training, weight training. I would love that because you might be surprised. You're going to get a bunch of things handled along with your blood sugar, but it might be a fun, straightforward place to start because you can do it wherever you are. You don't necessarily have to even be at the gym. You can do it at home.
All right. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day, Dr. Yates.
Thank you. You too. Take care, Dr. Greenleaf. Bye-bye.